Welcome everyone back to another video on the channel. Today we are talking about the Saints that look ready to break out. So it's been a few weeks of pre-season or off-season training so far, so still pre-Christmas training, and we've seen a lot of the boys come back in seemingly career best shape, and that's a lot of the young boys as well. So I just wanted to talk about like which Saints we could see break out on different levels. So expectations, I guess, for each player is kind of relative to what we have seen from them in the past. So I've identified 4 different categories that I can kind of use to describe the progress I expect several players in the squad to make by the end of 2025, just by, I guess, observing training and the observations of other people as well, of what is going on at training. So the 4 categories are, firstly, hit the ground running. So these are the kind of players who haven't debuted yet, but I expect them to debut pretty quickly. We saw Wilson debut round 1 last year, Philippo the year before, and then Owens and Nazai Wanganeen-Milera also debuted pretty early. So these are those types of players. The second category is the next step. So these are players who've played before, but they haven't really established themselves in the best 22. So we've got players like Cooper Sharman from last year, who was kind of on the fringes but then really cemented himself. Ryan Burns as well to an extent. So it's these types of fringe players who solidify their spot in the 22. Then there's the next level. So these are players who are good players for us but haven't really hit that next step in their career. So a kind of reference to this is whether they can kind of make the top 10 in the best and fairest. So that was kind of what Mason Wood was able to do a couple years ago. Nazai Wanganeen-Milera as well, when he took that next level off half back. And then the 4th category is the breakout stars. So these are the guys who just become stars of the competition. So, when we saw Jack Sinclair do it, Jack Steele, Callum Wilkie, all those types of players. So we'll go over each of these categories. I've listed down 3 players for each of them, so let's just get straight into it. So we'll start with hit the ground running. So 3 players here who are yet to debut, but I expect them to debut quite quickly. So the first player, I'm not going in any particular order, just in order of how I've listed the players. So Max Hall, I think, is a player who looks a lot fitter than last year. He was a mid-season recruit, obviously, so we haven't really seen much of him in his short time at St Kilda, partly due to injury as well. When he had that, I think it was a back issue late last year, but he did finish the VFL season really strongly. He isn't a big disposal gatherer, he doesn't record big numbers, but when you watch him you can really see the impact he has on attacking chains. So I think he's an impact player, kind of in the mould of Liam Henry, maybe a bit more contested and a bit less speed, but nonetheless still kind of plays in that similar role. So he looks slimmed down, he looks fitter, runs better, he's just looking more prolific in training drills. So he's starting to settle down at the club. There's also the side to him where he was the biggest improver in the VFL last year, over the off season, since he had several years of interruptions prior to that. So he had 2 ACL injuries, he had COVID, so he was in that COVID drafty cohort, so that's why likely to be a late bloomer from what we've seen so far as well. So if Liam Henry isn't ready for the first month of the season or something like that, I think Max Hall is a real chance to slot straight in. Toby Travalia as our top pick from the 2024 draft, I think, is one who could play every single game this season and establish himself not only as a debutant but a best 22 player. So that fits into that next step category that I had before, but not going to get too excited at the moment because there's still a bit of development to go with Travalia. He's obviously got that elite running capability which suits Ross Lyon's game style to a T, but he's got a slim frame, so whether that AFL body is there or not. But we had doubts over Wanganeen-Milera in his debut season, and he went pretty well in his first season. My guess is Travalia starts on the halfback and wing rotation, and eventually, as the season goes on and he becomes more comfortable at AFL level, he starts to play a bit more midfield time. But yeah, by looks of training, he seems to already be a really important part of our forward half transition. The boys like getting the ball in his hands, and he likes to run with it. So he's a big part of that run and carry side that we see in Bradley Hill, Liam Henry, Darcy Wilson, all those types of players. So just another one of those types of players to add to the side. And yeah, it'll be exciting to see how fast he can progress into the midfield. But yeah, I think he'll make his debut probably within the first month of the season at the latest, if not round one. Harry Boyd, his signing hasn't been confirmed by the club yet, but I'm pretty sure he has signed, so we're just waiting for that announcement. But he's already made 26-year-old ruck, won the Norwood Best and Fairest. I think he won Best on Ground in the grand final as well. So he's got the credentials there. He's a bit undersized for a ruckman, but I think he's very similar to Richmond's Toby Nankervis, who's kind of established himself as one of the best ruckmen in the league, despite being sub 200 centimeters as well. So I think as long as Boyd can, use his size to his advantage, and really try to squeeze as much quality out of that one standout attribute, I think he can play a role in the AFL side. And I think Ross is pretty keen on partnering Marshall with another ruckman, so I think Boyd could be that player. He can push Marshall forward a bit more, and we will have a bit more flexibility and kind of protect Marshall a bit more since he's been in the ruck for a couple of years now, and it just seems like he's been in the wars the entire time, and we don't want his body to deteriorate as fast as it seemingly has been the past couple of years. So with Boyd coming in, he's very strong, he's pretty mobile for his size, and he's good overhead as well, solid overhead with good ruck craft. So I think he has that ruck craft element to his game that Marshall doesn't really have. Marshall obviously the far superior follow-up ruckman, but I think we can better use Marshall's traits elsewhere. So yeah, bringing Boyd early in the season I think is a possibility. Whether it's with Marshall or without Marshall, I guess that's up to circumstance, whether Marshall gets injured or if the coaches end up tactically pursuing that dual ruck setup. We'll move on to the next step. So these are the guys who could break into the best 22 after having some opportunity in 2024. So we'll start with Hugo Garcia. Was a linear improver, I think, over 2024. We saw him come in. He was impressive in pre-season, but as the season wore on, he became more and more impressive with the ability to develop his ground balls in the VFL. And I think he's set for a big 2025 season. He's been missing from training a bit the last week, but prior to that, he was extremely impressive. He was very prominent through all the drills. He looks bulked up, so he looks a lot stronger, and his natural aggressiveness I think holds him very well in that midfield, and he's been just heavily involved in training his craft and his skills. I think at the start of the season we'll see him be still on the fringe a little bit, but I think by the end of the season we'll see that he's in the best 22. I think with a bit of solid VFL form early, I think he'll be able to establish himself quite well in the best 22 once opportunities arise with injuries and whatever. So I think Garcia is set for a big season, as is I think Isaac Keeler. So he's been one of the shining lights so far this preseason. There's always been doubts over whether he actually makes it or not, but there's never been any doubt over his natural talent. He's a unicorn athlete, at almost 200 centimeters. He's an elite runner. He's got elite sprint, agility, overhead ability, so he looks stronger. His arms look more defined and bigger, and his repeat running in those drills has been exceptional. He's always been tearing them up at the front of the pack, so clearly he's still maintained that ability to run despite being a bit bigger in terms of muscle, and he also looks improved overhead, so I think he's clunking more marks with that added strength. And I think there may be a spot for him early in the season with Caminiti still on limited duties with his shoulder. So I think Keeler could easily not only play a few games but become a best 22 player potentially, if we elect to move Caminiti back into defence and then run a forward line of Keeler, King and Sharman. Angus McLennan is a player who made his debut in 2024, played a few games and looked pretty promising. I think the one doubt over him is where is his best position, because as a third tall, he's a bit undersized at I think 188 centimeters. But then for a halfback, he doesn't really have that skill and class required for that as well. So I think this preseason he's been training as that third tall, albeit undersized. I think there's a bit of James Sicily in him. I think Sicily is 188 centimeters as well. So if McLennan develops the elite defensive craft that's required of an undersized defender, then I think he could definitely play position there. Obviously, he has Callum Wilkie as a mentor, so you can't really get better than that as a mentor. So, and he looks well improved this year. He's got that one-touch overhead intercept marking ability. He reads the play really well, so he's got all of those footy smarts required to play as a third tall. So I think it's just the defensive craft required to lock down an opponent when required that I think he needs to develop. But I think if he is able to do that, he will become a very important part of our defense with his ability to intercept as well as battle. I think he's been playing on the bigger opponents at training, so Keeler and Owens, Sharman. So I think we're really trying to get that craft into him and hopefully have him ready for round 1. I'll move on to the guys who I think can take that next level and become top 10 in the best and fairest. So starting off with Darcy Wilson. Obviously had an exceptional debut season in 2024, and it looks like he's just going to keep developing in that linear fashion. So it looks like he'll be going strength to strength. He looks just as fit as last year. He's still running as well as he is, and he looks bigger as well. So good off season of the gym. Obviously doesn't say much, but he's really letting his actions shine on the field this preseason. He's been one of the major links in the attacking chains. I think in 2024, he was kind of just that guy who was on the outside and covering space to help with the structure, but wasn't really a part of the attacking chains until later in the season when we started getting the ball in his hands a bit more. And I think that's going to be one of his more active roles in 2025 when we see him, running for handball receives, and kind of playing that Errol Goulden role where he plays on the outside but he kind of just roams wherever he wants. I think that's something we might see with Darcy Wilson, and it could see his numbers go up a lot because we'll be getting the ball in his hands. The one caveat about that is whether that impacts our defensive structure. So I don't know if Ross Lyon would be willing to do that, sacrifice some structural integrity in order to have some more freedom with the attack in Wilson. So that will be something that will be interesting to assess, but it definitely is something that has a lot of upside if we get it right and can compensate for that lack of structure. I think a lot of people have suggested Wilson as a guy who could potentially move into an inside midfield role purely because the quality isn't there in our inside midfield, and we desperately want more quality in there. But I think this role allows Wilson to stay on the outside while kind of having the impact of an inside mid. I think wingers are typically have less of a ceiling in terms of their performance, but if Wilson is able to free roam off the wing, I think that gives him a lot more upside as a damaging player on the outside, and it does let the inside mids do their thing. So the likes of Steele, Phillipou, Dow, Clark, Garcia, Windy, etc. While he runs on the outside with the likes of Hill, Naz, Sinclair, Henry, Travalia, etc. So this does allow the likes of Phillipou to thrive on the inside. So Phillipou obviously finished the season extremely well. I think we are well aware of the things he is doing on the track because it's been pretty well documented. He's pretty much improved in every single aspect. He was really good in the time trial. He's been very prominent on the track with his skills and his craft. He just looks better physically. He looks fitter, stronger, more explosive through the legs, and more skillful and vocal, which is very important. I think he has that confidence and belief in himself to be able to be vocal on the field and let his actions speak just as loud as his words, which is really promising. I think he's learning to drive his legs more. I think that was a problem with him in the midfield over the past couple of seasons where he wouldn't use his power to its absolute maximum. So I think that is something that he's been working on and looks to be getting better as the weeks go on over preseason. I don't think there's much else to say apart from he looks ready to explode, and I think top 10 BNF is pretty safe for him. I think he could push for top 5. Yeah, I think he's just going to be, Jack Steele, Jack McRae, and then Filippo in that midfield. I think that's going to be a really potent combination in the midfield in 2025. And another guy we can add to that inside midfield mix is Hunter Clark. So, his career has been very interesting to track to date. Started off really well off half-back and then suffered a lot of cruel injuries, and moving to the midfield kind of has looked promising at times, but he hasn't really got that continuity and consistency in him yet. So at the moment, through pre-season, he looks fitter and he looks stronger. It's been a clean run so far, so touch wood, he hopefully continues this form all the way through 2025, because I think with some continuity, Clark could really establish himself as an important player for us. He's got that unique, classy skill set, can kick on both feet, wins contested ball, and can spread on the outside when he's fit. And I think we saw when he had some good momentum in the latter half of 2024, he was really important in our midfield, and that was when we started winning more games, when we had the impact of Clark and Dow with their contested ball winning and clearance winning ability. They took the load off Steele to be more attacking, and it just made our game plan flow a lot better with his improved skill through the middle. So I think Clark is someone who we can't write off yet. I think he is someone who could push top 10 in the BNF if he has a full season. Now we'll go to the more exciting breakout stars who could push for All-Australian. I think there are a few players who could be around this area. So I'll start with Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. I think this is the most obvious one. He's just been a very linear improver as well over his career. He's played about half the season in his first season. Second season was really good off half back. And third season obviously was exceptional in 2024. So I think in 2025 he'll look to continue to improve. It's kind of interesting with him because he's already such a good player. You don't really know how much better he could get. But if he can get higher up the ground with more inside 50s and be a bit more damaging up the field, that would definitely push his case for All-Australian. The two All-Australian halfbacks this year were Dane Zorko and Dan Houston. Zorko averaged 26.3 disposals in 2024 and Houston 23 disposals. Zorko averaged 5.1 score involvements, Houston 4.9. For reference, Jack Sinclair averaged 6 score involvements, so I think he got scammed for All-Australian, but anyways. And Wanganeen-Milera averaged 4.3, so 0.6 less than Houston and 0.8 less than Zorko. So just that extra score involvement I think could really gets Naz into that All-Australian conversation. And I think in terms of disposals, he was at 25.7, which is better than Houston, but slightly less than Zorko. So I think ultimately for Nasiah to get All-Australian, I think he has to play in a better side. Zorko, Houston, not exactly the standouts in terms of statistics in their in that position, but Zorko plays for the team that won the premiership, and Houston plays for a team that I think made the semi-finals or preliminary finals. So both successful teams, and ultimately their players get to see that success as well. So as long as our team, I think, is able to make finals, Nasiah could easily become an All-Australian. And I think the same can be said about small forwards, which is why I have Jack Higgins in this category as well. I think he's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. We've come to know that Higgins is just a really good player for us, but I think he can go to that next level. We've seen his starts to 2023 and 2022, I think. I think it was last year when he kicked so many goals in that first half of the season before concussion came in that he was in the All-Australian conversation, I think. And I think he can do that again. He's done that 2 years in a row, I think. And he definitely looks fitter this year. I think he's lost a bit more fat, and he looks more well-defined in terms of physical stature. So with a bit more fitness, the ability to run out the season a bit better. I think if he can play 23 games for the season, he could easily be in that All-Australian conversation, because I think that small forward cohort isn't as strong as it has been. Like, there aren't any standouts. He's only 26 next year, so he's right in his prime, and I think with a big preseason, with that added fitness, and a full season without any disruptions, he could really establish himself as an elite player of the competition. And I think he can do so alongside Max King, who obviously had a really poor season in terms of injuries, but the club has invested in him, that new contract, and have publicly said that they believe he can be on that same trajectory as Charlie Curnow, who I think has won the past 2 Coleman medals. So that is speaking very highly of a guy who hasn't really proved anything yet. So, but yeah, I think in terms of King's physical stature, he looks a lot bigger than what he has been in the past. He looks to have just lived in the gym ever since he got injured, so that is really promising, and it looks like he's hitting his rehab really hard. He's bulked up, running well, which is really important, because I'm not exactly sure what role he will play, whether it's centre half forward or full forward, but he does have the physical attributes to, I think, play either role now. So I think his likely partner will be Sharman. So whether the coaches prefer Sharman's craft at full forward or King's strength at full forward, I don't know, but either way, I think he's set himself up to really be able to thrive in either position. I think he'll be able to compete better in 1v1s, so we often see him get pushed under the ball, and even in wrestles, like, he just gets comfortably beaten. But with his added size on his 207-meter frame, I think it makes it a lot easier for him to compete against, those monster key defenders in the comp. At full fitness, he's already a 50-goal forward. He's proved that in the past. I think he kicked 52 goals in 2022, so he definitely has that ability already. So if he can just really condition his body to be more preventative to injury and resist injury a bit more, and then have that added strength and craft to his game with a bit more practice, I think you could become a 70-goal forward, which I think in the modern game does win you a Coleman medal. Coleman medal usually correlates with All-Australian, so I think especially with Macrae and Philippou running through the midfield now with that added ball use through the centre, I think he'll get better delivery. And so yeah, I think the sky's the limit for what this guy can do. I think 2025 really is the season for Max King to thrive. We've been saying this for years now, but he does genuinely look to have made a change to his body, and hopefully I think his mindset has just always been very, very strong. It's just not eventuated due to some unlucky situations, like getting hit in the head by a golf ball before round 1. So yeah, hopefully his luck turns in 2025 and we'll see him really take the competition by storm. So those are the 3 breakout stars, and that's all 4 categories. So I've listed 12 players in total, and I'm sure there are players that you guys will want to suggest that I haven't talked about, which kind of shows how exciting of a time it is now for the entire squad. We've got a really young squad. A lot of them are developing at really rapid rates, and really, we could talk about these players for ages and hours on end. But yeah, there's guys like Ari and Hasty and Collard and other players who could really establish themselves as well. But I think these 12 guys are the main guys we should be looking out for in 2025. It looks a very tight-knit group this preseason, a very good culture. Everyone seems to be buying into this Ross Lyon philosophy that will run sides to the ground, and this game style I think can really stack up in the modern game. We've got one of the best defenses in the league, albeit our defensive coach has changed to Jared Rivers, so whether he can kind of maintain that as Corey Enright's successor remains to be seen. But I think it's very exciting times for Saints fans, and look forward to watching all of these young players in 2025. So I'll wrap the video up there. I hope you guys are just excited about these kids as I am. Make sure to leave a like on the video, comment your thoughts on which players you think will break out in 2025 and which players I've missed, because I'm sure you guys will have differing opinions to me, and whether you guys would push players down a category or up a category, add players in, whatever. Make sure to leave it in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for future content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.